Hello, everybody. My name is Beverly, and I had a dream this morning that I wanted to make a video about. So, in my dream, I was bent down. Maybe I was on my knees, I don't know, looking at a bench. Seemed like I was like in a bedroom or whatever. So I don't know if I was praying or what. But as I'm sitting there looking at the back of this bench, looking at the part where you sit, the part where your back would be. I'm facing that part. And then I start seeing this scene form on it. Now, at this time, obviously, I don't know that I'm dreaming. So I realize, I'm thinking that I'm realizing that I'm having a vision because I think I'm awake. So I'm looking at it, studying it, trying to see what am I looking at. So I saw a lot of people, and they were in the street. They were in a big wide street, and not a crowd like a protest, and not like a crowded New York street or anything, but there were a lot of people in the street, and I didn't see any cars. So everybody seemed to have been headed one way, but looking back the other way, as though something, not that something was chasing them, but they were moving away from something bad or looking back at something bad. So I'm looking at the people. I'm just looking, trying to figure out what is this I'm looking at. And then I noticed that the people have black hair. And then I'm looking, all their faces are turned away from me because they're looking back down the street. So I can't see anybody's face. So even without being able to see their faces, I'm able to determine that they're all Asian. So I know I'm looking into some Asian nation. I knew it was a modern nation because the ladies' hairstyles were, they just had modern looking hairstyles. And so I'm looking at them and just looking. And then they started yelling. They're all yelling. But their voices are all, at the beginning, just blended together as the way a large number of people just yelling out would be. So I couldn't distinguish anything. So once I was able to distinguish, and it wasn't even that I was able to distinguish, it was as though I was allowed to just hear over the crowd individual voices. So I'm going to read this. I was looking at a bench while I was on my knees, praying maybe. I saw people on a very wide street look back up the street. Everyone's back was such that I couldn't see their faces straight on. But I could see that they were Asian, city people. They were looking at a disaster and were all yelling out in panic. I was trying to determine what country in Asia this was. Then I heard their accents and knew it was China. Then I could hear individual voices yelling specific words. Economy, unsound, crisis. They were reacting to the collapse of their economy. They were shocked that their prosperity had not been real substance. This was a vision within a dream. When I tried to write the specific words I heard, I was hindered. There were action figures. I forgot about that part. There were action figures there, and they were creeping me out. Like this, whatever bedroom this was or whatever place this was, the person had a bunch of action figures. Like, they looked like, dressed like G.I. Joes. They were like G.I. Joes. They were like tough guys in like a white Navy uniform, different uniforms and stuff. Intimidating looking. They looked like they would just talk any second. It was just creepy. So I was distracted by that, and it was making the words that I heard leave my mind because I was hearing very, very specific things that I knew what was going on. And I had a good grasp of what was going on. But while I was distracted by this thing, those specific words were leaving me, and I wanted to write them down. But I didn't know that I was dreaming. I thought that I was awake trying to write down a vision. So, and there was also a guy there off to my right. And I thought he was the devil because he was really bothering me to keep me from being able to write. So the words that I wrote, that I read out, like economy, unsound, crisis, collapse, and all those things, those are just approximately what I heard. But I heard specific things that I just couldn't remember by the time I woke up because the G.I. Joe things distracted me and the devil in the dream distracted me. So when I woke up, I sat there like, wow. The way I always do when I dream something so out of the blue, so far from anything that I'm thinking about. So maybe kind of think, okay, well, what about China? We don't really hear about China being economically unsound. But any country that has a central bank is economically unsound. Any country that issues their currency as interest against their citizens and then has runaway growth because of it, that is unsound growth. It's like weeds. If you mow your grass and you have some old crabgrass or some weeds inside your grass, you can mow your grass one day, and then 2 days later, there are stems and weeds that are 3 times as tall as the grass. Anything that grows that fast is not good. It's not going to be healthy, sound growth. It's going to be the type of growth that is dependent upon speculation. And I've talked about speculation in other videos, but basically, to keep it real simple, if you talk about speculation, it is an economy that has a lot of borrowed money, has a lot of investor money, pension plans, basically other people's money. And they're going to take it and they're going to promise them, okay, we're going to grow your money. Or a bunch of easy loans. Loans real easy to get. So what these people do is they want to go and try and, flip this money. Because it's not their money, because it was so easy to come by, they do not invest that money in the same safe, sound ways that they would invest their own money, especially when they are protected by laws that would say, as long as you're not doing anything that is openly, overtly, and purposely fraudulent, you're not even going to be held responsible for it. It's just going to be, an investment loss for those people. People know that when they invest money, they could win big or they could lose everything. That's an understanding that you have when you enter into an investment. And when people took their pension plans and they went for companies saying, we're going to give you a pension plan, we're going to take care of you when you retire and give you a certain amount of money every month. And when they allowed companies to get out of that agreement and to say, oh, here, you take it. You take your money and you invest it. So what that did was that took that money from being safe and guaranteed to something that can go back out into the pile and be sucked back up by the rich. So it was just a way to defraud people out of another element of their income. Because part of the reason why you work for a company and it is considered even salary and would be taxable is retirement money. Money that you put into your retirement and money that your company may match. That's all income. Now the taxes for it will be delayed until you withdraw the money as an older person or at some later point. And if you withdraw it before a certain age, then not only do you have to pay the taxes on it, but you'll pay a penalty for breaking the rules of that type of an account. Okay. So if you want to think about when you have this sort of boom in your economy that's based on borrowing, that's based on government spending, and that's based on the investments of people's savings, it just amounts to other people's money. And then it is spent and invested in less responsible ways. So it would allow a company that may not be a sound company, that may be just one of those ideas that is a flash in the pan, sounded like a good idea, but it just didn't work out. Maybe that's what that company was going to be. But because you have all these people with all this new money, borrowed, printed, whatever, because they all have this money and they're looking to make it grow. The reason why they're looking to make it grow is because we borrow and print so much money into existence. The money that you have is constantly, every day of every hour, worth less and less and less. So if 100 years ago you put $100 under your mattress and then you go bring it out today and then you find out it's worth like $6. Now that's an extreme case, but the same thing is true now. If you just take money and 10 years later you just put that amount of money under your mattress, 10 years later, what you could buy with that money is far, far less. Because like I said, every dollar that is printed or borrowed makes the dollars that you already have more worthless. So for that reason, people feel pressured to invest. You can't just sit on your money. Because if you sit on your money, it's just like watching your money evaporate. It's just like having a big pile of dry ice. It could be a big mountain in the morning. But on a hot day, And in a hot economy, that pile of dry ice by the evening is going to be a remnant of dust. The value of your money is literally evaporating in this environment where they're just printing money and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. Your money is becoming worthless. So people try to invest in order to stay ahead of inflation. It used to be you could put your money in a savings account, and it was both safe and able to keep up with inflation. There aren't any safe investments like that because everything is just wild. Everything is just wild. It's growing so fast that there is no time to evaluate whether or not these are actually good investments. There is one word now that is becoming kind of everyday language, maybe not among everybody, but more people than ever, and that's the word IPO, initial public offering. And you know, this is the granddaddy of all speculation. Where they offer this company as shares to be purchased by the public. And someone makes a guess as to what they feel the potential value of this company is. And all this is happening, for the most part, before this company has ever become profitable. These companies may be still losing money. So you're trying to evaluate an idea. You don't want to miss out on the next great thing. You want to get in while these stocks are cheap. But by the time they introduce the IPO, it's already overvalued. So you have people throwing their money at gambles. And this is not a sound economy. That is what happened in China. China had this new influx of wealth because it became the seller to the world. When I was a kid, and I'm in my 50s, and when I was a kid, most things that you bought said proudly made in the USA. At the same time, U.S. citizens had jobs. Because if you make something in the United States, there's a place that you're making it. And that place is going to have employees. It's going to have janitors. It's going to have to, even if they make mops, they're still going to employ accountants. Because this business is going to need to have payroll. This business is going to need to interact with the IRS. So they're going to have accountants. They're going to have lawyers to draw up contracts with them to deal with other businesses. So losing the manufacturing base, losing those things that made things, these so-called blue-collar jobs, losing those jobs had a much bigger impact than it would at first seem. That's why the children who are graduating from colleges thinking that they're going into the professions are finding that those jobs are just few and far between. Because the base of our economy is the people that make things. Now, most of the things we buy, if you turn it over, it's going to say it was made in China. I'm going to pick up something at random here, if it's going to tell me where it was made. It was, of course, you can't see it, but it was made in China. That is random. I randomly did that. It used to be you'd see Indonesia, India, you'd see Malaysia, different things like that. But now it's just invariably China, 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 China. So now China is the place that's making things. China is the place that's going to have accountants. And they're not just going to have new factory jobs for people to go to. They're going to have new jobs for accountants, for lawyers, for graphic designers, and all the other, professions that you would go into. And all the things that come, because you're going to now have a growing middle class there. So they think that they're experiencing wealth. And there are people in China that are getting wealthy, but this is not real wealth. They're going to go through the same cycle that we went through in the United States, because you cannot build an economy on debt. You will not build the same type of rock solid sound economy that you would if you let it happen naturally, if you let the needs of the society make themselves known, and then let business people with what they call the entrepreneurial spirit, go out and meet the needs that they see within their communities, with the aim of serving that need, meeting that need, and also providing a source of income for themselves, a source of pride, a way to channel their gifts and talents. And it is enjoyable for a man to work and labor with his hands and to see the fruit of his own labor, even more so than it is to just have a nice factory job, join a union, and then, bully the company. So this type of economy that's grown off of debt, it's not, it's kind of like a tree with no roots. It can get really tall, really, really fast, because it's not spending its energy growing the roots. Everything that's happening, you see it above ground. But when a wind comes by, the tree is going to fall over, because you need your root system to be as wide, as deep, and as extensive as everything that you see on the top. But when you're just throwing money at people, when money is cheap and easy to borrow, people grow, businesses grow straight up, and they don't build the groundwork for a sound business with a good business model and a healthy relationship with the community around it, a healthy relationship with its employees that's going to build loyalty and a long-lasting thing that will serve the community. It's not going to be a get in and get out type thing, the way most businesses are, the way the businesses that grow up fast are. A good example of that would be the housing industry. In the first housing crisis from the early 2000s, money became so easy to borrow for flipping houses. There were secondary lenders that came up using investor money, and they weren't banks. So they didn't go through the normal mortgage process and approving proving that you have the income and blah. None of that. And even though that process was very, very much corrupted by easy borrowing. But these other things were even worse. You had these flippers that knew a guy. And this guy they could go down to like auctions, because at the early part of the crisis, foreclosures were a problem. So they could go and take up the foreclosures, go down to the courthouse steps and buy this place sight unseen. Now you got to come up with the money like within like 2 days. You got like 2 days to pay for the place. Obviously you cannot go through a mortgage process, even with the most shiesty bank, in 2 days. So they would have these other type of lenders where they would get these really, really high interest loans, like, a 20% loan, short-term loan. And they would be able to go get the money from the guy from that type of a place, buy the property, keep the property for about 6 months or however long, even less if they could, get the property in saleable condition, fix it up. Even if it wasn't high quality fixing, it would look good. They used to call it put some lipstick on it. Put in a granite kitchen, stone floors, stainless steel appliances on a place that has foundation issues. But when the person walks in to buy the place, they are dazzled by all these upgrades that you did. So you're able to maybe, sell that place for 30-40% more than you paid for it, even more if it was a foreclosure. So this created the illusion that housing prices were appreciating, because people were going in being dazzled by these superficial fixes to a house and paying a lot of money for it. Also, more people were seeing that this type of investment was working, and they're running in to do the same thing. Now every house that's for sale has more buyers, and they're bidding up the price, trying to bid against each other to get the house. And it just leads to this 80-foot tall tree with no roots under it whatsoever. So when the things that used to be made in the USA, and I'm guessing wherever else, were now being made in China, now all of a sudden China has more money to invest. Well, what do we do with it? Look at the U.S. housing market. Go over there. Look at that. That's a great investment. That's a great way to stay ahead of inflation. When your economy is growing like that, so is inflation. Because the more money that's introduced into the system, the less every dollar that already exists is worth. So they came over here and bought up so much property as investments. Not only that, because the U.S. economy had the reputation for being a strong economy, another place to invest your money to make sure that you're not losing the value of your money to inflation. So you got this pressure. You got to invest your money, or it's like that shrinking pile of dry ice. And eventually when you come back to it, it's gone. It's worthless if you don't stay ahead of inflation. So this whole system is just a rotting, eroding of your way of life. It's worse than a treadmill, because on a treadmill you don't get anywhere. In this system, you're actually losing ground. So they had the idea from decades past that America had a strong economy, not realizing what made America's economy strong: the manufacturing base, a working and effective middle class that actually had real wealth and property. All that's gone. So what used to be a good investment, what used to be a sure bet, is not a sure bet anymore. So they come over here and they buy our bonds from our government, thinking that in a certain period of time, they'll be able to turn that bond in for more money than what they paid for it, thus staying ahead of inflation. You either you grow your money or it's shrinking in your hand. That's the thought. So those are some of the major ways that when people say China owns us, they own a lot of the U.S. debt in property, because when there was that delusion that property was gaining value, they're over here buying property, not realizing that them being over here buying property was also the reason why the property was going up. It's just, it's terrible. And then because they remember the past, U.S. has a good, strong economy. Their bonds are always good. Buy their government bonds. So they own a lot of our government debt as well. Now, what would happen if the Chinese economy actually did collapse as it did in the dream that I had today? What's going to happen is they're going to come over here and say, I have money in America. I'm going to get it because times are hard for me now. What happened in 2008, 2009 when people lost their jobs? The first thing they went to was their savings. So these people think they have savings invested in the United States in the form of real estate investments and also in the form of bonds, government bonds. Now, the thing about a government bond, if I'm not mistaken, a bond has a maturity date. You don't have to wait until the maturity date to redeem the bond. You have to wait until the maturity date to get the full value. Let's say if you paid $900 and it says on it $1,000. If you wait the full length of time, that's how you get the $1,000, even though you only paid $900. If you turn it right back in, maybe you get your $900 back, and that's it. The closer you wait to the maturity date, the closer it approaches to the face value of the bond. And the face value is the promise that it will be worth more in the future. Hopefully that makes sense. So they can just come over here and say, I want to get rid of my bonds. I want my money back for my bonds. I'm going to sell them. If they start selling U.S. bonds, if they start selling U.S. government bonds, the price of U.S. government bonds is going to drop. If they come over here and start selling properties that they've invested in because their economy has collapsed and now they need cash. If they come over here and start selling property, the bottom is going to fall out of the U.S. property market. Because when these things start happening, I had a dream not too long ago, and I made a video about the economy because of it, is that once a collapse starts, once that first domino falls, each thing that happens triggers the next part of the crash. If China starts selling U.S. debt, the United States economy will collapse. People's wealth, the wealth that they think they have, is tied up in their house. So if Chinese people, Chinese corporations, Chinese investment groups needing money come over here and start selling their property interests over here, it will have a tremendous impact on the U.S. property market. Suddenly, you'll have a lot of what they'll call inventory dumped onto the market. And you can't argue with supply and demand any better than you can argue with what goes up must come down. If you have an increase in supply and demand does not change, price goes down. The problem with the fact of price going down is that's not going to change your mortgage. If you have a $300,000 mortgage and a property whose value is going down, say it gets down to $250,000, and they can fall much more than that, but let's say it just goes down to $250,000. Now you can't sell it unless you have $50,000, $60,000 laying around somewhere. Now, if you can't sell it, what happens if you lose your job? What happens if you have to tighten your belt? You don't have any room to tighten it. You automatically go into foreclosure. You're going into foreclosure because you cannot sell the property. You cannot sell the property unless you're able to pay off the mortgage. If the most you can get for the property that you owe $300,000 on is $250,000, you can't sell it unless you have the other $50,000. So then what's going to happen? You're going to lose that house. Now the bank is going to throw that house right back onto the market for less than what you lost it for. And then prices are going to go down even that much more. Because now they don't even have to buy the $250,000 house. They can buy the one for $200,000 that the bank just threw on the market. Because they don't hold bad properties on their books. Because they got to pay taxes and HOA fees and all kinds of drama that goes along with owning a property. You know, they got to send somebody out there to mow the lawn and stuff. Banks don't do that. So once the collapse starts, all the things start to feed into each other. Real estate agents lose their jobs. Real estate agents immediately start making less money because the properties that they're selling are worth less. They're selling for less. They work on commission. So somebody who was barely making it, now they got to get out of that business. It's going, like they say, these things have ripple effects through the economy. So that was the dream that I had. I actually dreamed that China who we think of as strong. We think of them as not only a political enemy because they're communist, but now we think of them as an economic enemy because we owe them so much money. If their economy collapses, they're going to come over here looking for the money that they've invested over here. They don't know that it's bad debt yet. Many of them don't know that the prosperity that they are experiencing is speculative. It is not real sound growth. They don't know that. All they know is they're rich. They can buy what they want. Another reason why the Chinese government is not sound, the Chinese economy is an unsound economy, is because you cannot have long-term and lasting prosperity selling the world garbage. Somehow, China has gotten a monopoly. They have a veritable monopoly in the U.S. markets. So a lot of times when we're buying this stuff from China, it's because you're going through the store trying to look for something that was made in the U.S. or that is made better or that is of some substance and quality, and all you find is more garbage made in China. I can't tell you how many broken pieces of trash that I have paid good money for, that when you turn it up, it says made in China on it. People get tired of spending good money on garbage. And that's a recipe for a temporary, fake, unsound prosperity. Because as soon as people have an alternative, they're not going to buy your stuff. And you'll fall fast. So in my dream, I didn't know what triggered the fall of the Chinese economy. But they were in panic and they were looking back at a disaster. I don't know if it's some kind of natural disaster or if it's just the nature of the way they've gotten wealthy with the same tricks that we fell for as a nation. Okay. So that's that. God bless.